Hey, this is John Dearborn, and in this course we'll be talking about making games with C++. So, if you haven't used C++ before, that's okay. It is actually a really great language. It's one of my favorites, and it's very similar to C#. If you're comfortable with that language, then a lot of the things you know transfer directly over to C++ work. There are a few more complications, a lot more details to deal with, and part of that is how C++ really squeezes out as much performance as possible. It's probably the primary reason that you'd use C++. Well, performance, and that it is kind of the de facto standard of the gaming industry. A lot of games and game engines are built in C++. In fact, if you ever end up working for Unity or for a game studio that maybe has access to the Unity game engine source code, then you'll be doing work in C++. Unity is built in C++, even though it's scripted in C# and other languages. So, I'm going to get started in Visual Studio, and I'm going to first make sure that I'm ready to be using C++. So go to Tools, get Tools and Features, and it'll make sure that you're okay with installing stuff. And sometimes it wants to check for updates and all that stuff. Yep. Alright, so I have two components installed. I have the .NET desktop development for C#, and I also have desktop development with C++. This is the one that you'll want. So make sure that gets checked, and then you can install it and close this. So once you have the C++ tool set all installed, you can start making C++ programs. Go to File, New Project, and this is going to make both a new project and a new solution at the same time. I'm going to Visual C++, and I'm choosing an empty project. If you chose one of these Windows applications, it's going to give you a bunch of extra junk that really we don't need to start off with, and some of it is painful to remove. So I'm going to name my project Hello World, and you can probably guess where this is going. And let's see, let me find a good place for this to live. And I want the solution to be called Game 220. And we'll be creating a solution, a directory for that solution. Press OK. And so what I've noticed, for some reason, it didn't actually give the right name to my solution. So I'm going to right click on my solution and rename it Game 220. And then my project is called Hello World, and right now it's an empty project, just like I asked for, and it has nothing in it, just some organization filters. So I'm going to right click on my project, go to Add New Item. It brings up a new dialog for me to add a new file to the project. I'm going to be choosing a C++ file. It has the .cpp file extension, and that's a source file. I'm going to name it main.cpp and add it to my project. So now it comes up, and I'm going to write just some boilerplate code. That's what most of this Hello World program is going to be. Just how you get started with C++ is pretty much always to write this stuff, so you'll get used to it. Pound include, and then in angle brackets, IOStream. So this pulls in a header file that has code that you can use, objects that you can use, and specifically IOStream helps us to print out to the console and get input in from the console. We'll have another statement using namespace standard. And IOStream lives in the standard namespace, so all of the objects there, if you didn't use that statement using namespace standard, then you'd have to prefix all of your IOStream objects with std : and that gets messy real quick. So for our main function, the entry point for our program, we're going to declare it as returning an integer, name it main with a lowercase m, and then in parentheses we have some arguments. These are command line arguments. Int argc is the count of arguments, how many you get, and then the second argument is a little weird, char star, that's an asterisk, argv, and then open and close square brackets. So the second argument is effectively an array of strings, C strings. So they're treated a little differently than you might see them in like C#, where there's a built-in string class. There is a string class in C++, but it also inherits this char star type that is used for character arrays, which are effectively strings. So you'll see both of them, and they can be interchanged. So we have our main declared in that way, and now we can start printing stuff to the console. So this is most of the boilerplate already. So I'm going to use two objects from IOStream. Cout is console output, and I'm going to type cout and then 2 left angle brackets, and those together form the insertion operator. So we are pretty much sending a string to the cout object, and you can think of the insertion operator that way. So in double quotes, hello world, that's going to be sent to the console, and then we're using another insertion operator to also send the endl, end line object, so that we'll move it to the next line. And then if we want to just wait for a little bit, we can do cin, which is our console input object, cin.get. And then that's pretty much all we want this program to do. So when it's all done, we have to end the main function. So main returns an integer, and I do highly recommend that you always write the signature of your main function this way. It gives you more control over what it's doing. And so we have to return a value because we said we're returning an integer. And conventionally, the operating system is going to expect that if you return 0, that means no errors happened. And if you return anything that's not 0, so like -5 or 300, either of those would mean that there was a problem, and is treated as an error code. So sometimes that's useful information for whatever's calling your program. Alright, so we're done with this Hello World program, and we can test it out. Go up to the green arrow button and go. Alright, hello world. Enter. Alright, it looks like it works. So, we will get more into C++ as we go. See you next time.